We're looking at Islam again. It's all the traveling clad, your favorite Zionist white prince. Let's take a look.
We can go back and we can read the Quran, we can read the Hadith, we can read the Sunnah, we can compare it up with history, and we can see that there was a definite departure from a basic religious belief in 622 AD, and you can see the verses, how they changed.
Hell yeah, Alan West.
I study international relations over here at Boston University. I've staffed elections, worked on elections, worked in campaigns, worked in courts, worked with Homeland Security on countering violent extremism initiatives. So I'm a patriotic American who wants to go into public service to serve this country. Now, once you know that about myself, I just want to bring up something that you've said in the past that I was hoping to ask you a little bit about. So let me just pull it up. In a previous campaign event that you've had, let me just pull this up right here. You once said, and I will quote, "We already have a fifth column that is already infiltrating into our colleges, into our universities, into our high schools, into our religious aspect, our cultural aspect, our financial, our political systems in this country. And that enemy represents something called," and I quote you, "Islam. And Islam is a totalitarian, theocratic political ideology. It is not a religion. It has not been a religion since 622 AD. And we need to have individuals that stand up and say that." And then you went on to say that.
Well, let me ask you this. Have you ever,
I definitely have a question.
you're not asking a question. You're just reading a statement. Now,
Sir,
I'm going to ask you,
Sir, with all
because
due
I know what
respect.
you're trying to say.
No,
All due respect to
I'm
you, too.
not.
Have you ever read the strategic memorandum of the Muslim Brotherhood that was written in 1991 by Muhammad Akram that was found in an FBI raid in 2004 in the basement of a house in Northern Virginia?
Yes, I have. And if you were the Constitution of Medina, the Constitution of the Medina was the last document that Prophet Muhammad put out before he passed away. And
Did you ever read the Treaty of Hudaybiyah?
No, but, sir.
I mean, we can go back and forth on historical documents.
Sir, with all due respect, sir, I haven't even asked my question.
I know. That's why I'm waiting on it.
So let me ask you the question. So, you've called Islam a theocratic political ideology.
Okay.
So my first question.
So what is Iran?
So my first question is, how do you define a religion? And from there on, what makes Islam not a religion in your eyes? And then from there on, are you suggesting that American Muslims, such as myself, are not worthy of religious protections and religious rights as enshrined in our Constitution?
I did not say that.
So explain to me, how do you define a religion?
As a matter of fact, I left my house plenty of times to go over and fight in Kuwait and Afghanistan and Iraq for the ability for individuals to have freedom. But if you want me to sit here and deny history, if you want me to sit here and act like some things have never happened, I'm not going to do that. I do not have the onus to, make a statement about what is fact. Okay, we can go back and we can read the Quran, we can read the Hadith, we can read the Sunnah, we can compare it up with history, and we can see that there was a definite departure from a basic religious belief in 622 AD, and you can see the verses, how they changed. And I understand Islamic jurisprudence, and I understand the Arabic term nakish, which means subsequent verses of the Quran supersede the previous verses, but they're all still the verses of Allah as given down to Muhammad. So what I'm trying to tell you is when I look at the Islamic Republic of Iran, when I look at Saudi Arabia, and how interesting it is that Saudi Arabia was just put on the Commission for Women's Rights when they have the greatest violation of women's rights whatsoever. I have a problem with that, having two daughters, okay? So I will tell you this, I'm happy to work with you, but I think we need to come to an understanding that there is a problem. And if you want to continue on, as we just saw current administration, last administration do, with obfuscation, denial, and dismissal, I think one of the worst things that President Obama did was when he stood up there in August of 2014 and said, let me make myself very clear, ISIS is not Islamic. Well, I don't know what the I stands for. It's not Southern Baptist, it's not Mennonite, it's not Presbyterian. So you have to take the enemy for who they are and what they say they are doing, especially when the leader of the caliphate of ISIS has a PhD in Islamic studies. So I'm going to listen to him and I'm going to take him for who he is. But I will tell you that I thank you for standing up and doing what is necessary, just the same as I thanked those interpreters and translators that stood there with me fighting in Iraq and fighting in Afghanistan. But if there's to be a change in the Muslim world, if you want to call it that way, we need the young people to stand up. And the sad thing that we have not done in the United States of America, we have not stood up with you, just the same as the Green Movement in Iran, just the same as we misread the Arab Spring, just the same as we stood next with the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. We have made some very bad decisions. And I would
Absolutely.
With all due respect, sir, you have not answered my question. What defines a religion and why is Islam not a
Religion
religion?
is
Because in
man-made
your
dogma.
words,
No,
Islam is
no,
not
look.
a theocratic idea.
Since
Very
622
nice talking
AD,
point
since
you've given me,
622
sir.
AD, it has not reflected itself as being a religion, but yet it can still call itself a religion. That's the whole purpose of, like I said, the theory of abrogation. But we have got to understand that there is something that is happening that we need to work together to dismiss. And when I see the Organization of Islamic Cooperation that does not understand that there is a problem with Islamic jihadism, when I see an organization like the Council for American Islamic Relations that are, doing things to shut down free speech and shut down people that want to talk about this jihadist problem, then I see them more a part of the problem than a part of the solution.
Do you believe that Muslims are not condemning terrorism when they're the largest victims of jihadism and terrorism?
Well, I tell you something, if they were condemning terrorism, we probably wouldn't have as much terrorism.
Of course they're not condemning terrorism. When do Muslims condemn terrorism? It's a two-parter issue, right? In the West, they don't condemn terrorism because overwhelmingly they support it. Unfortunately, in the West, something happens where Muslims get to the West and they just start supporting the shitty ideologies that they came from in the countries they came from. But the major issue is the Muslims who are actually living under Sharia, under jihadism, all day, they can't pipe their mouth up. Their necks are so, there's somebody sitting on their neck at all times. They literally cannot call out the jihadism. They can't call out the Salafism. They can't call out the extremism and the Islamism that they're suffering under. That's the framework of their fucking lives. They're stuck. They're stuck. And I find the audacity by this young Muslim lad to get so, he's just so, like, offended. It's like, bro, he's explaining it to you in such a methodical, such a calm manner, so respectfully. I wouldn't go as far as to say that Islam is not a religion. I've also never contended with that point. Maybe something to look into, but I've never seen proof of it not being a religion. I don't know, as I guess somebody calling it a death cult or a cult, or like, I wouldn't put it at that, because Sufism still exists, Ahmadism still exists, Bakhtashi Islam still exists. And these are, for all intents and purposes, very reform, calm version of Islam's that millions of people adhere to. So you can't, in good faith, call it all not a religion. But a very, very interesting clip. Actually, he backs it up in such a beautiful way. Actually, really, really impressive. I'll see you guys in the next one. I love you a long time. Goodbye, clats. If you believe in my content and want to support me, just know your help is needed. There's a bunch of great ways to support me, being PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, or joining my Patreon community down below. Patreon is the best way to support my channel, and you'll get a bunch of cool perks depending on what tier you join. Another great way to support me is by buying my merchandise on thetravelingclat.com. I regularly drop new merch designs like this beautiful hat or this amazing shirt, where you can support the channel and get something cool for yourself. I also have an amazing Discord community with people from all over the world. Thank you so much for your support.